This podcast is brought to you by Reynolds and Reynolds, the industry leader in automotive technology. Learn how Spark AI, Reynolds' unified AI data layer, can help you unlock your full potential by visiting rey.com/spark-AI. That's rey.com/spark-AI.
Welcome to Daily Drive for Monday, April 21st, 2025. I'm Jamie Butters, Executive Editor of Automotive News in Detroit.
And I'm Kellen Walker in Las Vegas. Today on Daily Drive, Tesla's brand health is seen facing a code red. CATL counters BYD's fast-charging battery claims. And in tariff news, consumer prices are seen rising, while metals tariffs keep suppliers up at night. Plus, Nissan's North America sales chief is hustling to improve consumers' view of Nissan and Infiniti.
In this environment, I think we all have to be very nimble, and Nissan is proving that we can do that.
Let's run through all the news you need to know to keep up in the auto industry.
With earnings set to be announced Tuesday afternoon, Tesla is facing a code red moment. That's from Dan Ives, a usually bullish equity analyst with Wedbush Securities. He advises that CEO Elon Musk should step back from his controversial work at the so-called Department of Government Efficiency and refocus his attention on the world's most valuable automaker. Ives wrote, quote, "Musk needs to leave the government, take a major step back on Doge, and get back to being CEO of Tesla full-time." Musk is synonymous with the Tesla brand, he wrote, adding that his political activism has damaged the brand globally. First quarter vehicle sales fell 13%, and 2 weeks ago, Ives slashed his price target for Tesla stock by 43%, citing the brand crisis and President Donald Trump's trade policies. Results will be released after the market closes tomorrow.
In other EV news, there's a battery battle brewing in China. Contemporary AmpereX Technology, the world's biggest producer of batteries for electric vehicles, unveiled the latest versions of its cells, playing up the durability and range of its products as the perceived limits of EVs still stop many consumers from making the switch. CATL teased the latest innovations at its Tech Day on April 21st in Shanghai. One of the main products its executives talked about was an upgrade version of its Shinsing battery, a cell it says can now offer 520 kilometers or 323 miles of range from just 5 minutes of charging time. Rival BYD, which is primarily an automaker but which also makes its own batteries and semiconductors, recently launched a car system it says can charge a vehicle for 400 kilometers in about the same time. The competition is important, said Joanna Chen, an analyst with Bloomberg Intelligence. She said the two companies control 70% of China's EV battery market, the world's largest.
Price increases stemming from President Donald Trump's tariffs on automotive imports are expected to reach consumers in the coming weeks, potentially slowing what has so far been a robust spring selling season. Ford Motor told dealers last week it might need to raise prices on vehicles produced starting in May if Trump doesn't ease his tariff policy. That followed similar warnings by lower volume automakers, including Ineos Automotive and Ferrari, which both announced price increases of as much as 11% on certain vehicles. While most other brands so far have held the line in spite of the 25% tariffs, J.D. Power expects the average new vehicle price will increase about 5% by year end. Uncertainty about prices is fueling a decline in consumer sentiment, according to Patrick Manzi, the National Automobile Dealers Association's chief economist. He cautions that the strength seen in the U.S. new vehicle market in the first quarter might not last. Of the March results, Manzi said, quote, "That's going to be a high water mark going forward here for a while." He said he expects many consumers to hold off on big-ticket purchases.
And on the supply side, while the auto tariffs and U.S. trade war with China have grabbed much of the world's attention, some suppliers say the Trump administration's steel and aluminum tariffs are the cause of their biggest worries. The 25% tariffs cover the metals themselves and a list of so-called derivative products made of foreign steel and aluminum, including many auto parts. Importers must determine the foreign steel or aluminum content in those products. That value is taxed at 25%. but calculating that number is difficult and time consuming. Companies sometimes need to drill down several layers into their supply chain to figure out the sources of steel and aluminum in their products and how much those metals are worth. And another complication, the list of tariff products is not static. It is expected to grow in the coming months. An executive at a major supplier, who asked not to be named given the sensitive political nature of the topic, told Automotive News, quote, "If you ask me what's keeping me up at night, it's the steel and aluminum derivatives." And those are today's headlines. So Jamie, Tesla is facing a code red moment. What does that mean for the brand's health?
Yeah, it's like this has been the, most successful EV company in the history of the auto industry. Now, of course, being challenged by BYD, but super valuable company, very high tech. And the CEO, known for micromanaging, right, has now been, absent for a couple of months. He's really focused on helping Donald Trump, streamline the U.S. government, get rid of a lot of workers. He's also been active in politics, in Europe, supporting the right-wing Alternative for Deutschland party. He's become such a polarizing figure that it really is beginning to hurt the brand. And he says, if you don't believe it, just talk to some consumers anywhere around the world. And he said it really is making a difference, taking a toll on the brand's image as well as the company's operations, as he's been so focused on politics.
Gotcha. Coming up, Nissan's Vinay Shahani tries to get the message out that the company's cars are better than people think. That's next on Daily Drive.
As your business gets more complex, it feels like productivity can't go any higher. You need a way to move forward to a future where you don't have to start every interaction from scratch. You don't have to search for actionable information. You don't have to manually pull data to make decisions. You need a future where the complex is made simple and you can do more with less. How do you get there? It all starts with a spark. Unlock your full potential with the next generation of automotive dealership technology that actually does some of the heavy lifting for you by texting leads, transcribing calls, making data-backed recommendations, and boosting your overall productivity so that you can spend your time and energy on what truly matters, selling cars and growing your business. Spark AI, Reynolds' unified AI data layer, can empower your dealership to operate more efficiently and effectively than ever before, so you can do more, sell more, and make more. To learn how Spark AI can help your dealership reach its full potential, visit rayrey.com/spark-AI today. That's REYREY.com/spark-AI to learn more.
Welcome back to Daily Drive. I'm Jamie Butters with Kellen Walker. It's been tough sledding at Nissan North America with changes in leadership and sliding sales, but sales and marketing chief Vinay Shahani argues that the company has a lot of strengths from which it can build, not the least of which is that the Nissan and Infiniti vehicles' objective value is better than its perceived value in the marketplace. Shahani spoke last week with our own Molly Boygan at the Auto Forum New York, which is related to the New York Auto Show. Here's their conversation.
I'm Molly Boygan with Automotive News, and I'm here with Vinay Shahani from Nissan. Vinay, thank you so much for taking the time.
Molly, thanks for having me.
So you were saying on stage that Nissan was able to make a reversal related to the Smyrna plant, and that works out very well with the tariff environment. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about what practically has to happen for that reversal, because the industry is responding to the tariffs, and it's obviously that can't happen overnight, but Nissan is making it happen in some way.
Yeah, I think when you think about manufacturing, obviously the supply chain is a huge factor in how you decide what you're going to do. So I think first and foremost, you got to make sure you have the labor, and all of this is handled by my colleague David Johnson. So I'm the marketing and sales guy. So at the extreme front end of the process, David is way more upstream in the process. So looking at the labor and making sure that we secure the labor, making sure from a supply chain perspective that the components that need to go into the vehicle can be secured in the right way, in terms of your demand forecasting. Different grades of the vehicle will warrant different parts. So all of that is a bit of an orchestration, and there's a lot of planning that needs to go into that. But ultimately, in this environment, I think we all have to be very nimble, and Nissan is proving that we can do that. And I'm very glad that we were able to secure that decision to keep that second shift and continue to optimize production of the U.S.-built Rogue moving forward.
And speaking of the tariff environment, as everyone is, you were talking about how Nissan and Infiniti are aiming to correct a mismatch between the quality of the product and the perception of the brands. And my understanding is that that's a marketing effort, and I'm wondering what else that takes and how you're thinking about those type of expenditures in this market environment with so much uncertainty.
Yeah, the way I would phrase it, what I've seen since I've been back with the brands since January of 2024 is we have a bit of a perceptual hangover. So when you look at real quality and real durability, we perform really well. So as an example, top performing Japanese brand in J.D. Power IQS for the last 7 years. Another example on the vehicle dependability study that comes from J.D. Power, Murano and Kicks won in their respective segments. Top 10 pick for Sentra from, Consumer Reports. All of these are third-party validations that the quality is actually good. However, when you ask some consumers who may have had a bad experience with a continuously variable transmission from Nissan back in 2012 or 2013, they may not see it that way. And I think that's where we can do a better job of proactively telling the story of what's the priority for the brand. QDRS is an absolute priority: quality, durability, reliability, and safety. Allison Witherspoon is our CMO, and she is really sort of embracing that to tell those stories in a very fun, edgy, irreverent way, getting back to some of the roots of Nissan being that fun underdog Japanese brand, but also sprinkling in some of these accolades to tell consumers that the story has actually changed and our quality is really good. Because it always helps when there's a third party that's saying it. If I were to say it to you, trust me, my quality is good, versus trust J.D. Power or Consumer Reports, I think you take it a little bit differently. And that's how we're really kind of approaching this from a marketing perspective.
And to what extent is it a challenge to get the resources and the attention toward that marketing picture, again, when so much is kind of swirling around the industry, both in terms of tariffs and the EV transition?
Yeah, look, I think our market is the most competitive market in the globe here in the United States. And I think you have to figure out your way of how you communicate through the different media channel options, of which there are more than there have ever been before. How does that work in terms of your mix between what's being done on linear television versus digital versus social, leveraging sponsorships and the entire marketing mix that's available to us? It's a little bit of a puzzle, but it's a challenge that is the dream of any marketer. I've spent many years of my career in marketing. I love that challenge. Allison is the same way. On the Infiniti side, Shelley Pratt has been at the helm of marketing, and we're having fun in doing this and really trying to take the true essence of each of these brands and explain it to consumers and really show how quality, durability, reliability, and safety is at the foundation.
You also spoke about trying to speed up the development timeline.
Yes.
For the products. And this is one of the most often mentioned advantages of the Chinese automakers in particular, and you sort of alluded to this on stage. How practically does this happen? Because another criticism of the American automotive manufacturing sector that I've heard is that automakers are sort of entrenched, and it's hard to, with existing tool chains and supply chains, move faster. So how are you approaching that?
Well, look, I don't have direct responsibility for product development. That's not in my scope of my role that I have, which is focused on marketing, sales, after sales, dealer network development for Nissan and Infiniti. Fortunately, I have a lot of smart colleagues that work on the product development side of the business. So Pandakutira, he's our senior vice president of planning. David Johnson, responsible for manufacturing. Chris Reed, my peer, who's responsible for engineering. These are the guys that are really embracing this new process, which obviously entails a lot more meticulous planning, a lot of digital tools that allow for, perhaps less physical prototyping and more digital prototyping, using these digital tools to predict performance and optimize performance. These are the types of things that allow you to go from 55 months down to 30 months. And ultimately, we think the consumer wins in those cases because you can bring those products to market faster.
Thank you so much for your time, Vinay.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
That's Daily Drive for today. I'm Jamie Butters.
And I'm Kellen Walker. Automotive News executive producer Jake Neer is off today. Thanks to our own Michael Martinez and John Irwin for their reporting for today's podcast. You can get the latest news on EVs, tariffs, and everything happening in the auto industry at autonews.com.
Come back tomorrow for an interview with Jeff Bernstein, president of the Association for Advancing Automation, about how robots are finding bigger roles on the factory floors.
The form factors have changed, the numbers of applications have changed, and the amount of robots out there increased dramatically.
We'd love to hear from you. Let us know what you think of the show and the topics we covered today. Send us an email at dailydrive@autonews.com or leave us a voicemail at 313-444-2774. And if you enjoy the podcast, remember to leave a review, and subscribe so you never miss an episode.